All right, so today we're diving into a story that's kind of wild. Imagine you're in Paris, right at Gare du Nord, trying to catch a train, and boom, the whole place just shuts down. Police sirens everywhere, lights flashing. It's a
It
mess.
sounds chaotic.
Total chaos. And the reason? They found a bomb from World War II just chilling by the tracks.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, it's 2025. Why are we still dealing with bombs from like almost a century ago?
Well, it's actually not that uncommon, especially in Europe. During World War II, the sheer amount of bombs dropped was insane. I mean, we're talking millions of tons of explosives.
So many that they just couldn't find them all.
Exactly. Tons of them never went off and ended up buried. And now, all these years later, they're popping up during construction, excavations.
So basically, it's like these hidden ticking time bombs all over the place.
Pretty much, yeah. Experts think there could be thousands, maybe even tens of thousands still out there across Europe. And not just bombs either. We're talking grenades, artillery shells, mines. It's like a whole hidden arsenal from the past.
Wow. It's kind of crazy to think about. Like, you have these super modern, high-speed trains connecting countries and cultures, and then bam, stopped in their tracks by something from a totally different era.
Yeah, it really shows you how the past can still affect us today. And the impact of this particular incident was huge. News reports said all Eurostar service to and from London got canceled for the entire day. Thousands of travelers stranded, weekend plans ruined.
Oh man, I bet people were freaking out. You're just trying to get somewhere, and your whole day gets thrown off by something you have zero control over.
Definitely. And it's not just the travelers who were affected.
Yeah.
Think about the businesses near the station, the people living nearby. They all had to deal with the chaos and security measures.
So it really ripples outward.
Oh yeah, the impact goes way beyond just the immediate inconvenience.
So we've got this unexploded bomb causing all this disruption, but what happens next? What do they even do in a situation like this?
Well, the first thing is always safety. They cordon off the area, you evacuate everyone, and then specialized teams come in. Usually military folks who are experts in handling these things.
Must be a pretty intense job.
For sure, it takes a lot of expertise and steady nerves. Then what they do depends on the type of bomb and where it is. Sometimes they can defuse it right there if it's safe enough.
Diffuse it? Like how?
It involves carefully disabling the triggering mechanism. It's very delicate work.
Sounds super nerve-wracking.
Definitely high pressure. But sometimes diffusing it on the spot is too risky. Maybe the location is bad or the bomb's in rough shape. In those cases, they move it to a controlled area where it can be detonated safely.
Whoa, transporting a World War II bomb. That has to be like something out of a movie.
It's a whole operation for sure. Lots of planning and coordination involved.
So they have procedures in place, but it's still crazy risky.
Absolutely. And it brings up some tough ethical questions too. Like when deciding whether to defuse or detonate, how do they weigh the risks?
Right, because even a controlled detonation could still have an impact, right? Damage to the environment, maybe release some nasty stuff into the air.
Exactly. You got to think about the potential damage and the effect on people living nearby. Having a bomb go off in your neighborhood, even if it's controlled, can be pretty unsettling. It brings back the reality of war in a very real way.
So you've got the immediate safety concerns, the logistics of dealing with it, and then all these ethical and environmental factors too. It's way more complicated than just digging it up and diffusing it.
That's for sure. Each situation has its own unique set of challenges. But the technology used to find these bombs has gotten a lot better over the years, with things like ground-penetrating radar and metal detectors that help us pinpoint their locations more accurately.
Well, that's good at least. It makes finding them a little easier, I guess. But what about the bombs themselves? Have they changed at all over time?
Unfortunately, not in a good way. They actually get more unstable as they age. The metal corrodes, the explosives degrade, and the triggers can get super sensitive.
So it's like a race against time? The longer they sit there, the more dangerous they become.
Precisely. That's why the work to find and dispose of them is so important. It's not just about preventing accidents, it's about dealing with a threat that's constantly growing.
That's a sobering thought. So far, we've talked about the procedures, the risks, the ethical stuff. But what about the people doing this work? The bomb disposal teams? What's it like for them to face that kind of danger all the time?
It's got to be incredibly demanding, both physically and mentally. These people are highly trained, and they know the risks, but they still go out there and do it. They have to be calm under pressure, make decisions in a split second, and trust their training completely.
Yeah, it takes a certain type of person to handle that.
For sure. You need technical skill, courage, and a huge commitment to keeping people safe. And the mental toll can be really tough.
We talk about the physical dangers of war, but the mental and emotional scars are just as real. And they can last for years, not just for the people who fought in the war, but for anyone dealing with the consequences.
You're absolutely right. It shows how the true cost of war reaches far beyond the battlefield and can affect generations to come.
Well, this has been a fascinating and honestly a bit scary look into something most people probably never think about. We've uncovered these hidden dangers, talked about the complexities of dealing with them, and seen the incredible bravery of the people working to keep us safe.
It's a topic that needs more attention for sure, especially since these discoveries are still happening all over the world.
But for now, let's switch gears a bit. We've gone over the general procedures, but I want to dig deeper into the specific challenges of dealing with World War II bombs. What makes them so tough to find and defuse? What types of explosives were used, and how have they changed over time?
Great questions. To answer those, we need to get into some of the technical details of this dangerous work.
And that's exactly what we'll be doing in the next part of our deep dive.
World War II saw some crazy advances in technology. Sadly, a lot of it was focused on weapons. The bombs they used back then were unlike anything we'd see today.
So what were these explosives like? What made them so different?
Take the German SC-250, for example. It was a 500-pound bomb designed to punch through thick bunkers and fortifications. They packed these things with a mix of explosives, usually TNT and RDX.
And after sitting in the ground for like 80 years, how are those explosives holding up?
Well, that's a huge problem. They weren't exactly made to last this long underground. Moisture, temperature changes, chemicals in the soil, it all takes a toll.
I can imagine.
Yeah, they become unstable, unpredictable, and even more dangerous to handle.
So not only do they have to find these bombs, but they're dealing with things that could basically go off at any moment.
It's like a ticking time bomb that gets more and more volatile over time. And each one is unique depending on the explosive, its condition, and where it's buried. Sometimes even moving it a little can be enough to set it off.
Wow.
Yeah, it adds a whole other level of difficulty for the bomb disposal teams. They know one wrong move could be disastrous.
It must take incredible skill to defuse them safely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
One technique they use is called controlled detonation. Basically, they trigger a small, contained explosion to neutralize the bomb's main charge.
So they basically blow it up on purpose.
In a way, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's all very controlled. They usually move the bomb, if they can, to a special location designed for this kind of thing.
Like a super remote area.
Yeah, they have to plan everything carefully to make sure the detonation doesn't put anyone or anything at risk.
I bet it's a pretty intense sight to see a controlled detonation.
It is. You really get a sense of the power these old weapons still have. It also makes you realize how important it is to invest in new technology to find and neutralize these threats safely.
Sounds like they're constantly having to come up with new ways to deal with this as they learn more about these aging explosives.
Definitely. The methods used to deal with unexploded ordnances have come a long way over the years. Like now we have advanced ground-penetrating radar that can create 3D maps of buried objects.
So they can see exactly where the bomb is.
Yeah, it's a lot more precise, which is crucial, especially in cities where digging around could hit infrastructure or damage buildings.
Makes sense.
And technology keeps getting better. They're even developing robots that can check out the bombs remotely and sometimes even disarm them.
That's amazing. So there's hope that we can make dealing with these dangerous leftovers from war safer and more efficient in the future.
That's the goal. But technology alone isn't enough. We also need countries to work together and share information.
What do you mean?
A lot of countries hit by conflict don't have the resources or expertise to deal with unexploded ordnances effectively. International organizations play a big role in training people, providing equipment, and supporting those countries.
So it's like a global effort.
Exactly. And it needs consistent investment and commitment.
You mentioned international organizations. Can you tell us more about what they do?
Some organizations focus specifically on this problem. One example is the Mines Advisory Group, or MAG. They work all over the world in places where there's been conflict, clearing landmines and unexploded ordnance, and teaching communities how to stay safe.
It sounds like incredibly important work.
It really is. And they're not the only ones. Lots of organizations are out there doing amazing things to make the world safer. It's not just about removing the physical danger. It's about helping communities heal from the trauma of war.
So it's like addressing both the visible and the invisible scars left behind.
Yes, exactly. And that brings us to another interesting aspect. The psychological impact of living under the constant threat of unexploded bombs.
I can only imagine what that must be like, especially in parts of Europe that were bombed heavily during the war.
You're right, in some places, the fear of these hidden dangers is a part of daily life. It limits where people can go, where kids can play. It affects their sense of safety even in their own homes.
Wow.
It's a huge burden, and it highlights the need for mental health support and resources for these communities. It's not just about getting rid of the physical threat, but also helping people cope with the emotional and psychological effects.
So dealing with the aftermath of war is about so much more than just rebuilding buildings. It's about rebuilding lives and entire communities.
You got it. And that can take generations.
This has been such an eye-opening look at the challenges of dealing with unexploded ordnance, both from a technical and a human perspective. We've talked about the kinds of explosives used in World War II, the psychological impact on people living with this threat, and so much more.
And we've only scratched the surface. There's still so much more to explore. We haven't even touched on the environmental impact, the cost of all these efforts, or the laws that govern this kind of work.
True, there's a whole world of information out there for people to discover. For our listeners who are feeling intrigued or maybe a little freaked out by all this, where can they go to learn more?
There are tons of great resources online. Organizations like the Halo Trust, which focuses on humanitarian demining, have websites with information, stories from people affected by this, and ways to get involved.
I bet those first-hand accounts are pretty powerful.
Yeah, they really drive home the human side of this issue.
Well, on that note, I think we've given our listeners a lot to think about. Finding a World War II bomb at a busy train station in 2025 is a stark reminder that the past isn't really gone. It makes you think about the lasting impact of war, these hidden dangers, and the importance of working towards a safer world.
It really shows human resilience, but it's also a call to action.
As we go about our lives, let's take a moment to appreciate the peace and stability we have and remember the people working to keep us safe. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep asking questions. So we've talked about the human cost, the technology, and the global efforts to deal with all this. But there's one more big piece we haven't really touched on. What about the environment? What happens to the planet with all these unexploded bombs?
Yeah, that's a crucial point. These remnants of war don't just threaten people, they can have a lasting impact on the environment too.
I mean, it makes sense, right? Explosives and metal casings just sitting in the soil for decades. It can't be good.
You're right. The chemicals in these explosives can seep into the ground and contaminate the water. That affects plants, animals, the whole ecosystem.
And even when they do a controlled detonation, aren't there still risks?
Oh, definitely. When a bomb explodes, it releases all sorts of harmful stuff into the air, gases, particles, and depending on where it is, you could have soil erosion, damage to habitats.
So it's like this balancing act. You got to get rid of the threat, but you also want to minimize the damage you're doing in the process.
Exactly. It's a reminder that there are no easy answers when you're dealing with the legacy of war. Every decision has consequences.
So it's a big, complicated problem that needs a really thoughtful approach.
I like how you put that. We have to think about people's safety, the environment, and what the long-term effects of our actions will be.
It makes you think about the true cost of war, right? Not just the immediate damage, but the stuff that keeps affecting the planet for years to come.
Absolutely. These bombs are a stark reminder that the consequences of conflict can last for generations.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. We've looked at how they get rid of these bombs, the ethical issues, the environmental challenges.
Yeah, and we've really just scratched the surface. There's so much more to explore.
I know, right? So for our listeners who are now hooked on this topic, maybe a little freaked out, but definitely want to learn more, where should they go?
There's a ton of information online. The Halo Trust, for example, they do amazing work with humanitarian demining. Their website has all kinds of resources, stories from people on the ground, and even ways to get involved.
I bet those stories are really powerful.
They are. They give you a real sense of what people are going through.
Well, that's a good place to wrap things up, I think. Finding a World War II bomb in a busy train station in 2025. It's a wake-up call. It shows that the past isn't really over, the effects of war can last for a really long time, and we need to keep working towards a safer world.
It's a story of resilience, but it's also a reminder that we can't just ignore this problem.
Right. We need to learn from the past and take action. So as you go about your day, take a moment to appreciate the peace and stability we have and think about the people out there working to keep us safe. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep asking questions.